Modern parenting is spawning a generation of messed up people. Talk about a guilt trip. Bandy joins us now. It's nice to see you. Oh, we're all doing our best, but where are we going wrong?
Where we're going wrong is we're misunderstanding what kids really need to develop into independent adults. In previous generations, parents understood that their job was to work themselves out of a job. Their job was to prepare the kids to leave the home and function independently. And now, at least in my country, in the United States, the job of a parent is to always be there helping, protecting, anticipating problems, to get the kid into college. It's as though parents are trying to create permanent employment for themselves.
You outlined 3 really bad ideas that have messed up kids since 1995. What are they? And what's that year? What's the relevance of that year?
So let's start with the year, because this is the puzzle that really got us going. My co-author, Greg Lukianoff, defends free speech rights of college students. He discovered weird stuff happening right around 2014 on American college campuses. Students were suddenly really fearful. They were asking for trigger warnings, safe spaces, and we couldn't understand, what do you mean you're not safe on campus? We didn't realize it at the time, but what happened was Gen Z, the kids born in 1996 and after, are really different from the millennials. Kids born in 1996 suddenly developed very high rates of anxiety and depression beginning around 2013. And this is happening in the US, Canada, and Australia.
Why?
Because social media comes out in 2006, Facebook opens to the world, but it's not quite so toxic yet, and 11, 12, 13-year-olds don't have it. In America, between 2009 and 2011, that's when teen social life migrates from going over to friends' houses and talking, as we're doing, to all online. By 2011, they're all online, and in 2012, the girls' rates especially of anxiety and depression and self-harm, they cut themselves a lot more, go shooting up, and this is happening across the world.
And why do you think that is? Because I'm not quite following. Like, I understand the social media, but why is that leading to self-harm?
Yeah.
What is it about the social media that causes that anxiety?
So we've all known for a long time, kids are, especially when they hit their teen years, they're really trying to figure out, who am I? How do I compare? How do I get prestige? And girls in particular are more affected by social comparison, especially social comparison based on looks. So social media is devastating for girls in a way that is not so bad for boys. The boys are mostly doing video games, and it turns out that has problems, but it's not as terrible as we thought. Social media, I think, is worse than we thought. So it's the social comparison, it's the bullying and aggression. Boys' aggression is more physical, so social media doesn't amplify it, but girls' aggression is more about relationships, damaging relationships, and social media ramps that up. So for a lot of reasons, the girls are suffering much more than the boys, and this is true in all the English-speaking countries.
It seems to me you're sort of talking about a perfect storm here, where you have kids who are going straight from a family environment where they're not exposed to failure, where they're told they're wonderful, that everything they do is fantastic, no matter whether it's good or bad, so they're not used to disappointment or criticism.
That's right.
And then the only external stimuli they get, or the major external stimuli they get once they leave that environment, is a combination of a whole bunch of celebrities or influencers who seem to be perfect, combined with a peer group that is often really toxic and hostile at the same time. I mean, this is just horrible. So how do we fix it?
That's right. So that's right. I just want to make it clear. It's not just the social media. As you say, we've been gradually working on promoting kids' self-esteem, which is a terrible idea. You don't want to make kids have high self-esteem. You want to make them have the skills so that they will earn the esteem of others. That's what we need to be doing. So we've gradually failed to do that. We've overprotected our kids in the US and Australia. Most people who are older in the audience, what are your fondest memories of childhood? Was it with your parents, or was it out with your friends, having adventures? But we stopped that in America in the 1990s. We said, no more. If a kid is caught playing in the park, we're going to arrest the parents for child neglect. So we overprotected kids, made them weaker, and then those same kids, we give them social media way too young, and now little, words, they get damaged by words. So we've really done a number on Gen Z.
So what do you think about participation awards in sport, where everyone gets a ribbon just for competing? Is that a bad thing?
Oh, it's a terrible, terrible idea. What people don't seem to understand is that kids need stress. They need a lot of stress. What they don't need is long-term stress, chronic stress. But they need to have Challenge, failure, recovery, learn something. Challenge, failure, recovery, learn something, and then you succeed.
So we need to stop being helicopter parents as well?
Yep, that's right. In America, we call it helicopter, concierge, snowplow. We've got a lot of names for what we're doing. But yeah, we've got to stop it. We've got to let kids have experiences and learn from experiences, not from direct instruction.
Another, it's interesting you say this now because a very high-profile author and a children's educator, John Marsden, was in the newspapers on the weekend saying that if parents aren't telling their kids no at least once a day, then they're not doing their jobs right.
Exactly. That's right. You have to, kids need a lot of frustration. If they don't get lots of little frustrations and learn to deal with lots of small risks, they won't be able to calibrate their internal emotional system. And then you send them off to us in college. I teach at New York University. Yep. You send them off to us and they're not ready and they freak out and they're asking for trigger warnings and safe spaces and we can't educate them. So yeah, we've got to stop what we're doing to our kids and let them have the kinds of experiences that kids have always had to grow strong and independent.
So are you saying you should let your kids go to the park on their own? Basically
Yes.
that.
Yes.
But how? But like, that it's one thing to say that,
what
but it's
age?
quite a big ask.
Because I've just listened to a whole podcast about the Moors murders and I'm never letting her out of the house again. You know, there is that.
Right. But this is the problem. Yes, people do get murdered on this planet. It does happen, but it's very, very rare. And guess what? Kids are committing suicide, and it's a lot more common. So, which do you want? Do you want to have your kid elevate? But do you want to?
The much greater risk is that your child will not be able to deal with
herself.
disappointment and kill themselves rather than be killed by someone.
And when do you start giving them that kind of freedom? What age are we talking here?
Well, as I survey people around the world, all of us older people remember going out and playing on our own at the age of 6, 7, or 8. But then I ask people, when do you let your kids out? Oh, 10, 11, 12. Street kids start, I've studied this around the world, street kids start around the age of 8. At the age of 8, kids can find food, run from the police, and find a place to sleep at night. Okay, at age 8, we can be letting our kids go to the park and play soccer and then come home. So I think age 8 is, if you're not letting your kid out, if you are always supervising your kid after age 8, I think we need to see that as a kind of unintentional child abuse. Kids need independence.
You were talking about a sort of, I suppose, a perfect storm before about, the combination of being mollycoddled and then exposed to ungradiated risk. That's right.
Words.
But, I mean, this Generation Z is probably not that far off from having their own kids, and they are going to presumably want to insulate them from the world and protect them because they're so anxious and scared of the world. Are we looking at a sort of change in the way human beings operate in a sort of a bubble-wrapped world?
Yes, I believe that we are. If kids are exposed to the chronic anxiety of always being online, always checking your profile, why did he like this and not this? If kids are raised with chronic anxiety, it's going to reset their brain development, chronic high cortisol levels, change brain development. I think we are going to have a generation that's more anxious. And previous generations, even though crime has been declining in my country very rapidly, we still act as though the world is so dangerous because, yes, it's not perfect. It's not perfectly safe. So, yes, I think your scenario is likely to play out. Gen Z will be even more anxious and more overprotective. We've got to break the cycle now.
Can you undo it? Can you undo it if they're already partway down that path?
Yes. There's a couple things that I would advise all parents to do. So, how many of you in the audience, I can speak to the cameras, are wrestling with the question of what policy do you have about social media and devices? I'd like to give you 3 simple rules.
Great.
1, all devices, all screens out of the bedroom by a fixed time every night. There's no reason to let them have devices overnight. They'll keep checking. 2, no social media until at least the age of 14. I'm trying to get it up to 16 in the United States as the norm. They're just not ready for it, and it's the young kids who are most damaged. And 3, you have to work out a time budget with your kid. I don't know if it's going to be 2 hours a day or maybe nothing up in the weekdays and whatever it is. You have to work out a budget. And the kids often are pretty reasonable. But if you don't have limits, if you don't use the Apple screen time controls, there are 1,000 psychologists in Silicon Valley who are working to keep your kid on 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
And what about, just quickly, punishments? Are you a fan of smacking?
Oh my goodness, no, not smacking, but there have to be punishments that follow quickly on bad behavior. We can't be afraid of using the negatives, but no, spanking and hitting, the research doesn't support that. Time out, just an instant. You count to 3, 1, 2, and on the 3rd occasion, bang, time out. It has to be quick. Small punishments, quick, are much more effective.
What are you doing after the show? Can you come back to my place? I'd love to have you sort out my boys.
And I'm just around the corner if you can pop in after that.
We could talk to you all day. You have one more event this Thursday night, actually, at the Enmore Theatre in Sydney. Get along, folks. Tickets can be purchased through Ink
Think Inc.
Oh, Think Inc, apologies, .org.au. Jonathan Haidt, thank you so much.
Thanks.